There it is. My key. Number 3, always my favorite. I slipped it into the lock, and it wouldn't turn. Not even a fraction. 50 years in this house. 50 years of memories. Now, locked out. By my own daughter. Have you ever built your whole life around someone, only to find the door shut in your face? This is how it ends, I suppose. But what do you do when your own child becomes a stranger on the other side of the door? I tried again, slower this time, more deliberate. Nothing. Her stubborn refusal. My heart, usually a steady drum, began a hesitant tattoo against my ribs. Locked out. Locked out of my own house. My house. The one I've lived in for, well, let me see, nearly 50 years. 50 years of laughter, tears, quiet evenings, noisy celebrations. 50 years of memories woven into the very fabric of the walls. And now, locked out. The absurdity of it hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't a faulty lock. It felt deliberate. Her cold, hard certainty settled in my stomach. I checked my pockets again. The familiar ritual of an aging man, a comforting routine suddenly turned perverse. No, just the same old keys, my wallet, a slightly crumpled handkerchief. Nothing else. The absurdity of the situation warred with a rising tide of something else. Something colder, sharper. Betrayal. The word hung in the air, unspoken, yet heavy as a tombstone. The key felt heavy in my hand, suddenly imbued with a weight far beyond its metal. It was more than just a key. It was a symbol, a tangible representation of my exclusion, a stark reminder that the comfort and security I'd built, brick by painstaking brick, over a lifetime, were now denied me. The afternoon sun, which usually warmed my face, felt strangely harsh, unforgiving. The familiar street, the houses I'd known for decades, suddenly seemed alien, hostile. This wasn't just a locked door, it was a locked heart. And I had a terrible feeling I knew whose heart it was, my own daughter, my Sarah. Right then, let's try this again. Maybe I've got the wrong key. A silly mistake. Happens to the best of us, they say. Except, I don't think it does. Not this. I fumbled through the bunch again, each key a tiny, cold comfort in my trembling hand. The spares, the old ones for the shed, even the one for the long-gone bicycle. Nothing. Not a single one would turn. My mind, usually sharp as a tack, felt sluggish, cotton wool stuffed. It couldn't process this. It refused to. It was a simple matter of keys, a simple locked door, nothing more. Except, it was everything. It was the culmination of years, of a life spent here, in this house, in this very spot, and now, barred. I tried the windows. A foolish notion, I know. They're all double-glazed, modern things, but the hope, however faint, was a lifeline. I tested the latch on the kitchen window, the one I always leave slightly ajar for the cat. Nothing. It was locked tight. The familiar rhythm of the house, the comforting creaks and groans were silent, mocking. Panic, a cold, clammy hand, tightened its grip, but I pushed it back, fought it down. It wasn't panic. It was bewilderment, disbelief. Pure, unadulterated disbelief. Sarah wouldn't, would she? No, she couldn't. Could she? The questions spun in my head like a dizzying carousel, each rotation bringing me further from the solid ground of reality. I sat on the step, the cold stones seeping into my bones. The key, still clutched in my hand, felt less like metal and more like a heavy leaden weight. It wasn't just a key, it was a symbol of my own failing grasp on things, a symbol of my vulnerability. The setting sun cast long shadows, painting the scene in hues of orange and purple, beautiful yet cruelly indifferent to my plight. The denial was a shield, fragile yet all I had left against the encroaching truth. The truth that I, Arthur, was locked out of my own home by my own daughter, and that somehow felt worse than the cold. My eyes, scanning the ground, caught a flash of white under the doormat. A small, folded piece of paper. A note. My hand, still trembling slightly, reached for it, my fingers hesitant as if afraid to touch the truth it held. I unfolded it slowly, deliberately, each crease a small, agonizing step toward a reality I desperately wanted to avoid. The handwriting was familiar, unmistakably Sarah's, neat, precise, and devoid of any warmth. My gaze drifted over the words, each one a tiny dagger piercing the fragile shield of my denial. At first, the words swam before my eyes, blurring together in a haze of disbelief. I reread it, slowly, savoring each word, each carefully chosen phrase, each deliberate omission. It was a short note, brutally efficient, lacking any warmth, any hint of the daughter I thought I knew. It spoke of necessary changes, restructuring and a new beginning. Vague, corporate-speak jargon, the kind of language you'd expect from a boardroom meeting, not a conversation between a father and daughter. There was a mention of arrangements being made, an offer of assistance at some unspecified future point. The cold formality of it, the utter lack of empathy, was a physical blow. A wave of nausea washed over me, the chill deeper than the evening air. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a calculated move, a deliberate act of exclusion. The polite phrasing, the carefully constructed sentences, were a cruel mockery of genuine concern. It was a carefully crafted rejection, delivered with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. The hurt was a raw open wound, bleeding into every fiber of my being. The betrayal, once a whisper, now roared in my ears, a deafening symphony of shattered trust and broken promises. 50 years. 50 years of shared laughter, shared tears, shared life, reduced to a cold, impersonal note slipped under a doormat. My Sarah, my own daughter. The reality of it was almost unbearable. This wasn't a simple locking of a door, it was the locking of my heart. And the key, it seemed, was lost forever. Dad, it began, the word itself feeling strangely alien, detached, like it was written by a stranger, imitating a familiar script. Due to unforeseen circumstances, certain necessary changes have been implemented regarding the property. And property, my home, my life, reduced to a piece of property. At these changes, the note continued, its tone as cold as the autumn wind, require your temporary relocation. We are making arrangements for alternative accommodation. Alternative accommodation. The euphemism stung, a carefully chosen word to soften the blow of eviction. Or perhaps to conceal the true brutal intent behind it. In the near future, a more detailed plan will be communicated shortly. In the meantime, please do not attempt to enter the premises. Premises. Another sterile word, replacing the warmth of home. It felt like a legal document, a formal notice of eviction, not a message from a daughter to her father. We understand this is a difficult time, it went on, the irony thick enough to choke on, and we will endeavor to provide assistance where possible. Sincerely, Sarah. Sincerely. The word felt like a cruel joke, a final icy insult. Sincerely. After 50 years, after a lifetime of shared moments, laughter, tears, and unwavering love. Sincerely. My hand trembled as I reread the note, each word a fresh wound. The carefully chosen phrases, the formal tone, the utter lack of warmth. It was all so as it calculated. There was no apology, no explanation, no hint of remorse. Just a cold, clinical statement of fact, delivered with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. The unforeseen circumstances remained deliberately vague, a convenient shield behind which Sarah hid her actions. It was a betrayal, pure and simple, disguised in the language of corporate indifference. The finality of it, the complete severing of a lifetime's bond, was almost unbearable. And the coldness, oh, the chilling coldness of it all. The wind picked up, swirling fallen leaves around my feet, a miniature, melancholic dance. And then, strangely, I saw her. Not the Sarah of the cold note, the stranger who'd locked me out, but the Sarah of my memories, a little girl, with pigtails bouncing, laughing as she chased butterflies across the lawn. This garden, this very garden. I was kneeling beside her, helping her plant sunflowers, their bright faces mirroring the joy in her eyes. The sun was warm on our faces, the air filled with the scent of honeysuckle and freshly turned earth. It was a perfect summer afternoon, a snapshot of perfect happiness. We spent hours together, building miniature castles in the sandpit, her small hands clasped in mine. The memories flowed, vivid and sharp, a stark contrast to the cold reality of the present. I remember her first day at school, her tiny hand gripping mine as we walked down the lane, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. I remember her school plays, her clumsy attempts at ballet, her infectious laughter that could chase away even the darkest clouds. I remember her first crush, her shy smiles, her teenage angst, the heart-to-hearts we shared late at night. Each memory was a precious jewel, a testament to the bond we'd shared, a bond that now felt irrevocably broken. The image of her, a young woman graduating, her eyes shining with pride and ambition, filled my mind. The years melted away, the passage of time blurring into a montage of shared moments, milestones, and unwavering love. And then, the contrast hit me with the force of a physical blow. The little girl in the garden, full of life and laughter, was gone, replaced by a stranger who could write such a cold, impersonal note. The sweetness of those memories intensified the bitterness of the present, the stark contrast a painful reminder of what had been lost. The wind howled, mirroring the storm raging inside me, a storm of grief, betrayal, and a profound sense of loss. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that stretched and distorted the familiar shapes of the garden. The vibrant colors of the flowers seemed muted, their beauty dimmed by the growing darkness in my heart. My mind drifted back to Sarah's teenage years, a time of change, of rebellion, of growing distance between us. It wasn't a sudden break, not a dramatic clash, but a slow, insidious drift, a gradual erosion of our closeness. I remember the slammed doors, the whispered conversations, the averted gazes, the music, loud and jarring, that echoed through the house, a constant, throbbing reminder of the gulf that was opening between us. Her room, once a sanctuary of shared laughter and whispered secrets, became a fortress, a place I dared not enter without an invitation. The shared meals, once a time of connection and conversation, became strained silences, punctuated by curt responses. There were misunderstandings, of course, arguments over curfew, over friends, over her choices. I tried to understand, to offer guidance, to bridge the gap, but my attempts often felt clumsy, inadequate. My words, meant to comfort and support, seemed to only push her further away. The generation gap, I suppose, felt like a chasm then. I tried to adapt, to understand her world, her music, her friends, but it felt like trying to grasp smoke. It wasn't a lack of love eyes on either side. I saw the flicker of affection in her eyes, even amidst the anger and frustration, but the communication broke down, the lines of understanding blurred, and the distance grew. I often wondered if I'd been too strict, too old-fashioned, too out of touch, or perhaps I was simply not equipped to navigate the turbulent waters of adolescence. The regret, a heavy weight on my chest, gnawed at my soul. The wistful longing for those lost years, for a chance to mend the fractured bond, was a painful reminder of what could have been. The silence of the evening mirrored the silence that had grown between us during those formative years, a silence that now seemed to echo down the decades. The night was colder now, the wind a mournful sigh through the bare branches of the trees. The image of Sarah leaving home filled my mind, a young woman brimming with ambition, ready to embrace the world. It was a proud moment, bitter-sweet, tinged with a sense of loss. The house felt emptier, quieter after she'd gone, a silence that grew, that deepened, that settled into the very bones of the place. The calls became less frequent, the visits shorter, the conversations more strained. The easy flow of communication, once a constant current in our lives, dwindled to a trickle, then a mere drip. It wasn't a deliberate act of rejection, not at first. Life intervened, as it always does. Careers, relationships, geographical distances, all conspired to pull us apart. But the distance wasn't just geographical, it was emotional. A subtle shift, a gradual erosion of our connection. The long phone calls dwindled to brief updates, the shared laughter replaced by polite pleasantries. The unspoken anxieties, the unvoiced concerns, grew like weeds in a neglected garden, choking the life out of our relationship. I tried to maintain the connection, to bridge the gap, But my attempts often felt futile. I'd call, leaving messages that went unanswered. I'd send cards, letters, small gifts, hoping to rekindle the flame. But my efforts were met with silence. It wasn't a dramatic falling out, no explosive argument, just a slow, painful fading, a gradual drifting apart. The loneliness, at first a subtle ache, became a constant companion, a shadow that followed me everywhere. And the silence. Oh, the deafening silence of unreturned calls and unanswered letters. The emptiness of the house seemed to reflect the emptiness in my heart. The cold night air mirrored the chill that had settled between us, a chill that now felt almost permanent. The years blurred, a montage of hurried visits, strained conversations and forced smiles. The easy camaraderie, once the bedrock of our relationship, had crumbled, leaving behind a fragile structure of polite exchanges and carefully constructed pleasantries. Her visits became less frequent, shorter, more perfunctory. The warmth had gone, replaced by a polite formality that felt like a thin veil over a growing chasm. We'd sit together, sipping lukewarm tea, the silence between us heavier than any words could express. I'd try to reminisce, to share stories of my life, but my words felt hollow, unanswered. Her responses were brief, her attention elsewhere, her eyes distant, lost in the thoughts that clearly held no place for me. I saw it in her eyes, the subtle shift, the growing distance, the unspoken truth that our connection was fraying, unraveling at the seams. I'd catch glimpses of her frustration, her impatience, the unspoken burden she seemed to carry. I wondered if I'd been too demanding, too clingy, too much of a presence in her life. Perhaps my own anxieties and fears had inadvertently pushed her away. The guilt gnawed at me, a constant, persistent ache. I'd replay our conversations, dissect our interactions, searching for my own failings, my own contributions to this gradual unraveling. The regret was a heavy cloak, weighing me down, suffocating me with its silent accusations. There were times when a spark of the old connection flickered, a fleeting moment of shared laughter, a brief glimpse of the daughter I once knew. But these moments were fleeting, ephemeral, quickly extinguished by the cold reality of our growing distance. The unspoken regrets, the unsaid words hung heavy in the air, a suffocating silence that now seemed to define our relationship, and the chilling realization that this was it, that this was the end, settled over me like a shroud. The cold seeped into my bones, a chilling reminder of my own mortality. The wind whispered through the trees, a mournful lament for the passing years. Age, I realized, was a thief, stealing not just my youth and vitality, but also my independence, my strength, my dignity. The aches and pains, once minor inconveniences, had become constant companions, a relentless reminder of my fading physical abilities. Simple tasks, once effortlessly performed, now required Herculean effort. The stairs, once climbed with ease, now seemed like insurmountable mountains. The garden, once a source of joy and pride, now felt like a burden, its beauty obscured by the weight of my limitations. The once familiar landscape of my own home, once a haven, now felt like a prison of my own making. The realization of my increasing reliance on others was a bitter pill to swallow. The loss of independence, the gradual erosion of my self-sufficiency, was a slow, agonizing process. The feeling of helplessness, of being dependent on the goodwill of others, was a constant source of anxiety and frustration. It was a humbling experience, stripping away layers of self-reliance, leaving me exposed and vulnerable. The pride I once held in my ability to care for myself was now a distant memory, and the irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, a man who had spent his life caring for others, now utterly dependent on the very people who seemed determined to abandon me. The weight of age, it seemed, was not just a physical burden but an emotional one as well, a heavy cloak of vulnerability that left me feeling exposed and alone. The cold wind seemed to mock my frailty, a constant reminder of my dwindling strength and the uncertain future that stretched before me. The chill wind seemed to mock my helplessness, a cruel reminder of my utter vulnerability. It wasn't just the cold, it was the profound sense of violation, of being stripped bare, exposed to the elements, both literally and figuratively. My home, my sanctuary, my refuge for 50 years had been taken from me, not by fate or circumstance, but by a deliberate act of cruelty. The irony was sharp, a bitter taste in my mouth. This wasn't some random act of misfortune. This was a calculated decision, a deliberate severing of ties, a betrayal of the deepest kind. And the betrayal wasn't just of our relationship. It was a betrayal of the trust I'd placed in my own daughter, the woman I'd raised, nurtured, loved unconditionally. It wasn't just my home that had been taken. It was my autonomy, my independence, my very sense of self. The decisions that shaped my life, the choices I made, the path I walked, all of it seemed to have been rendered meaningless by a single, heartless act. My life, once a tapestry woven with love, laughter and shared experiences, had been reduced to a single, stark thread of betrayal and abandonment. The feeling of powerlessness was overwhelming, suffocating. I was a man stripped of his dignity, his autonomy, his very identity. The weight of it pressed down on me, crushing me under its unbearable weight. The world, once familiar and comforting, now felt alien, hostile, a place where I was unwanted, unloved, and utterly alone. The cold intensified, mirroring the chill that had settled deep within my soul, a chill that threatened to freeze me from the inside out. And the injustice of it all, the sheer cruelty of it, was almost more than I could bear. The weight of it settled on my shoulders, a crushing burden of grief and bewilderment. It wasn't just the loss of my home, it was the loss of my daughter, the shattering of a bond that had spanned 50 years. The pain was a deep, gnawing ache, a constant reminder of the love lost, the connection severed, the future stolen. The unanswered questions haunted me, a chorus of whispers in the night. What had I done to deserve this? Where had we gone wrong? What unspoken resentments, what unaddressed grievances had driven such a wedge between us? The silence was deafening, a void filled only with the echoes of what might have been, the ghosts of a happier past. The sadness was profound, a vast and empty landscape stretching out before me, devoid of hope and comfort. It was the sadness of a broken heart, the despair of a shattered dream, the loneliness of a life lived in isolation. The images of our shared past, once a source of comfort and joy, now felt like cruel taunts mocking my present reality. The estrangement wasn't a sudden rupture. It was a slow, agonizing process, a gradual erosion of our connection, a creeping distance that had finally culminated in this brutal act of expulsion. And the pain was amplified by the knowledge that it could have been different, that with a little more effort, a little more understanding, a little more communication, things could have turned out differently. The unanswered questions gnawed at me, a constant source of torment. Had I failed as a father? Had I missed some crucial signal, some unspoken plea for help? The regret was a heavy cloak, weighing me down, suffocating me with its silent accusations. And the chilling realization that I might never know the answers, that the truth would remain shrouded in silence, was a pain almost too sharp to bear. The cold gnawed at me, a physical manifestation of the emotional chill that had settled deep within my soul. The hours crawled by, each one a testament to my isolation, my vulnerability, the pride I'd always held in my self-sufficiency, in my ability to handle life's challenges on my own, felt like a cruel joke. Here I was, a man defeated, stripped bare, utterly dependent on the mercy of others. The thought of reaching out, of admitting my helplessness, was a bitter pill to swallow. My pride fought back, whispering insidious doubts, fueling my reluctance. To ask for help felt like an admission of failure, a surrender to my own weakness. But the cold was relentless, the hunger gnawing, the exhaustion overwhelming. My stubborn pride was slowly eroding, chipped away by the relentless onslaught of my physical and emotional distress. The internal battle raged, a conflict between my ingrained independence and the stark reality of my situation. The weight of my years, the physical limitations imposed by age, the emotional devastation inflicted by my daughter's cruelty, it all conspired to break down my defenses. The stubborn refusal to admit weakness, to ask for help, began to crumble under the weight of desperation. Slowly, reluctantly, I reached for the phone. My hand trembled as I dialed the number, a simple act that felt monumental, a surrender to my vulnerability. The act itself was a testament to the depths of my despair, the overwhelming realization that I could no longer face this alone. The pride that had once been my shield was now shattered, leaving me exposed, vulnerable, and utterly dependent on the kindness of strangers. The call connected, and with a trembling voice I uttered the words I had fought so hard to suppress. I need help. The wait felt interminable, each minute stretching into an eternity. The cold seeped deeper into my bones, a constant, unwelcome companion. My mind wandered, replaying memories, both happy and sorrowful. The laughter of my youth, the joy of holding my daughter in my arms, the pride I felt watching her grow, these were juxtaposed with the bitter sting of her rejection, the crushing weight of her betrayal. I found myself reflecting on my life choices, the paths I'd taken, the decisions I'd made. Had I been a good father? Had I provided enough, loved enough, understood enough? The questions were relentless, a self-imposed inquisition that offered no solace, no comfort, only the gnawing sense of regret. The years seemed to blur together, a chaotic tapestry of triumphs and failures, joys and sorrows, all interwoven with the ever-present thread of my deep and abiding love for my daughter. A quiet dignity settled over me, a refusal to succumb entirely to despair. I would face this, I told myself, with the same resilience I'd shown throughout my life. This wasn't the end. It was merely a difficult chapter, a painful setback. Life had always presented challenges, and I had always, somehow, found a way to navigate them. This time would be no different. The long wait, filled with anxiety and uncertainty, served as a stark reminder of my own mortality, of the ephemeral nature of time, and of the fragility of human relationships. Yet even in this moment of profound loss and despair, a glimmer of hope remained. The hope that somehow, somewhere, some reconciliation was possible, that perhaps, one day, I could understand, could forgive, could find peace. The siren in the distance was a welcome sound, shattering the silence of my internal struggle and offering a glimmer of hope in the darkness. The flashing lights cut through the pre-dawn gloom, a jarring interruption to the quiet despair that had settled over me. Two uniformed officers emerged from the patrol car, their faces etched with a mixture of concern and professional detachment. They listened patiently as I explained my situation, the words tumbling out in a rush, a mixture of anger, disbelief, and utter exhaustion. The coldness of the night seemed to mirror the chill in my heart. The officers were efficient, their actions precise and methodical. They took notes, asked questions, their expressions remaining neutral, professional, yet somehow empathetic. They examined the note, its curt words a stark contrast to the warmth and affection I had always shown my daughter. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very document that had evicted me from my home was now being used as evidence in a situation I never imagined possible. The paperwork was a blur, a series of signatures and confirmations. Each stroke of the pen a further confirmation of my displacement, my loss. The reality of my situation settled in, cold and stark. I was homeless, temporarily at least. The officers, despite their professional demeanor, showed a quiet kindness, a genuine concern that softened the harsh edges of my predicament. They arranged for temporary accommodation at a local shelter, a temporary respite from the cold and the gnawing emptiness. The drive felt surreal, a jarring transition from the familiar comfort of my home to the uncertain environment of a place designed for those cast adrift. The stark reality of my situation weighed heavily on me. I was an elderly man, displaced from his home by his own daughter, reliant on the charity of strangers. The officers' professionalism and compassion provided a much-needed comfort in this painful, bewildering time. Their kindness was a small beacon of light in the encroaching darkness. The police station was cold and impersonal, a stark contrast to the warmth and comfort of the home I'd lost. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a relentless, almost mocking soundtrack to my predicament. I sat at a metal desk, the hard surface a reminder of the harsh reality of my situation. The officer, a younger woman with kind eyes, patiently guided me through the process of filing a report. Her words were measured, professional yet tinged with a quiet empathy that I found unexpectedly comforting. The act of recounting my story, of putting my pain and bewilderment into words, was strangely cathartic. It was a formal acknowledgement of what had happened, a step towards acceptance, towards finding some semblance of order in the chaos. Each detail, meticulously recorded, served as a testament to the cruelty of my daughter's actions, to the depth of my loss. The legal aspects were explained to me in clear, concise terms. The officer outlined the options available, the potential legal pathways I could pursue. But as she spoke, I felt a growing sense of resignation. Legal battles, court cases, lawyers. It all seemed so overwhelming, so exhausting. The energy required to fight for what was rightfully mine felt beyond my capabilities. The weariness of age, the emotional toll of the past few hours, had left me drained. My focus wasn't on revenge or retribution. It was on finding a place of peace, a way to rebuild my life, even if it wouldn't be in the home I'd cherished for so long. I signed the documents, my hand trembling slightly, and accepted the quiet dignity of my defeat. The officer's quiet understanding was a balm to my wounded spirit, a small kindness in a world that had suddenly felt incredibly cruel. The formal process was complete, but the emotional turmoil within me remained. A quiet, persistent ache. The shelter was functional. A stark, clinical space, devoid of warmth and personality. It was a far cry from the comfort and familiarity of my home, a place filled with memories, with the echoes of a life lived. Here, the air hung heavy with the scent of disinfectant and despair, a silent testament to the shared experiences of those who found themselves adrift. The thin mattress, the scratchy blanket, these were hardly comparable to the soft embrace of my own bed, the haven I'd known for so long. The shared room was quiet, a hushed space filled with the quiet breaths and restless movements of strangers. Their stories, though unspoken, were etched on their faces, lines of worry, weariness, and unspoken pain. We were all here, united by misfortune, by the cruel twist of fate that had uprooted us from our lives, leaving us stranded in this temporary purgatory. The shared silence was heavy, a palpable reminder of our collective vulnerability. The lack of privacy was jarring. The constant awareness of others, their presence a constant reminder of my displacement, my loss. Every sound, every movement was amplified, creating an atmosphere of uneasy tension. The walls seemed to close in, the space constricting, suffocating. I longed for the quiet solitude of my own home, the space where I could retreat, where I could be myself, without the watchful eyes and ears of strangers. The stark reality of my situation settled in, cold and unforgiving. I was a stranger in a strange land, a displaced soul wandering through a landscape of unfamiliar faces and uncomfortable circumstances. The sense of displacement was overwhelming, a profound loneliness that gnawed at my soul, a constant, unwelcome companion in this temporary, sterile environment. Sleep offered little respite, haunted by fragmented memories and the chilling reality of my current circumstances. Dawn broke, casting a pale light across the sterile room. The harsh fluorescent lights were dimmed, replaced by a softer, more forgiving glow. As I watched the light shift, a quiet strength began to bloom within me, a resilience born not of anger or bitterness, but of acceptance. This was my reality now, however harsh, however unexpected. The anger, the disbelief, the overwhelming sense of betrayal, these emotions still lingered, but they no longer held me captive. I had spent a lifetime facing adversity, navigating life's inevitable challenges. This was just another, albeit a particularly painful one. The losses I'd experienced, both great and small, had shaped me, molded me into the man I was today, a man capable of enduring hardship, of finding strength in the face of adversity. This wasn't the end. It was a turning point, a new beginning, however uncertain. The sadness remained, a constant companion, but it no longer consumed me entirely. I allowed myself to feel the pain, to acknowledge the hurt, but I refused to let it define me. I would not be broken. I would find a way to rebuild my life, to create a new sense of normalcy, a new sense of purpose. This wasn't about revenge or retribution. It was about finding peace, about moving forward with dignity and grace. The quiet strength I found within myself wasn't a sudden revelation, but a slow, steady burn fueled by years of experience, by the lessons learned through hardship and loss. It was a quiet acceptance of the present, a resolute determination to face the future, whatever it may hold. This resilience, this quiet fortitude, was my shield against the harsh realities of my situation, a promise of a brighter tomorrow, even in the face of today's darkness. The days blurred into a monotonous routine, waking, eating the meager meals provided, trying to find a sliver of comfort in the shared silence of the dormitory. There were moments of despair, of course, times when the weight of my loss threatened to crush me, but I refused to let it consume me entirely. I clung to my dignity, to the quiet strength that had always been a part of me. I found solace in small things, the warmth of the morning sun filtering through the grimy window, the kindness of a fellow resident offering a comforting word, the simple act of reading, losing myself in worlds far removed from my current reality. These small moments of peace, these fleeting escapes, helped sustain me, providing a refuge from the harsh realities of my situation. I wasn't defined by this event, by my daughter's cruelty. I was more than this. I was a man of resilience, a man who had faced and overcome countless challenges throughout his life. This was simply another obstacle, another test of my endurance. I would not let it diminish me or break me. My spirit remained unbroken, a quiet flame burning steadily against the encroaching darkness. I refused to succumb to bitterness or self-pity. I would not allow my daughter's actions to define the narrative of my life. My story was far richer, far more complex than this single painful chapter. It was a story of love and loss, of joy and sorrow, of resilience and hope. And it was a story that would continue, regardless of the setbacks, regardless of the pain. The quiet dignity I maintained wasn't a mask, but a testament to my inner strength, a reflection of the values I had held dear throughout my life. It was a refusal to be defined by the circumstances, a commitment to moving forward with grace, with a quiet determination to find peace and purpose in the midst of turmoil. This wasn't just about survival. It was about thriving, about reclaiming my life, my narrative, my dignity. Even with the quiet strength I'd found, the sadness lingered, a persistent ache in my chest. It wasn't a sharp, piercing pain, but a dull, constant throb, a reminder of the loss, of the fractured relationship, of the home I'd lost. It was a weight I carried with me, a shadow that followed me through the sterile hallways of the shelter, into the quiet solitude of my small room. The memories, once a source of comfort, now served as a painful reminder of what I'd lost. The laughter, the shared moments, the unconditional love. These were ghosts that haunted me, whispers of a past that felt both impossibly distant and achingly close. They were a constant reminder of the bond that had been severed, of the daughter I'd loved and lost. The silence of the shelter amplified the emptiness within me, a void that echoed with the absence of familiar sounds, familiar faces, familiar routines. The ticking of the clock, the distant hum of the refrigerator, these mundane sounds, once comforting, now felt stark and lonely, highlighting the absence of the life I'd known. Sleep offered little respite, filled with fragmented dreams and recurring nightmares of Sarah's cold face, her unforgiving words. I would wake with a start, heart pounding, the weight of my loss pressing down on me, a suffocating blanket of grief and regret. The sadness wasn't something I could simply shake off. It was a part of me now, woven into the fabric of my being. Yet, even in the midst of this profound sadness, I found a quiet acceptance, a recognition that this was part of my journey, a necessary stage in the process of healing. The sadness would remain, a constant companion, but it would not define me. I would carry it with me, but I would not be consumed by it. I would find a way to live with it, to find peace amidst the pain. The future stretched before me, a vast and uncertain landscape. Where would I live? Would I ever return to my home, to the life I'd known? The questions hung heavy in the air, unanswered, unsettling. The temporary shelter offered a roof over my head, a temporary reprieve, but it wasn't a solution. It was a mere holding pattern, a brief pause in the unfolding drama of my life. My relationship with Sarah remained a gaping wound, a chasm of misunderstanding and pain. Could it ever be repaired? Could we ever bridge the gulf that had opened between us? The possibility felt remote, a distant dream, yet a sliver of hope, however faint, persisted. Perhaps with time, with patience, with a willingness to forgive and to be forgiven, reconciliation might be possible. My physical health was another concern. The recent events had taken a toll on my already fragile condition. The stress, the emotional turmoil, the upheaval, these had exacerbated my existing ailments, leaving me feeling more vulnerable, more dependent than ever before. Would I be able to regain my independence? Would I be able to live a life of dignity and comfort, free from the constraints of illness and dependency? These were daunting questions, ones that cast a long shadow over my future. The uncertainty was both terrifying and strangely liberating. Terrifying because it represented the unknown, the unpredictable. Liberating because it freed me from the constraints of rigid expectations, from the weight of past certainties. It was an opportunity for a new beginning, a chance to redefine my life, to shape my future in ways I hadn't imagined. The path ahead was unclear, but I was determined to walk it, to face whatever challenges lay in wait with courage and resilience. The future remained uncertain, but my resolve remained steadfast. I would navigate this new chapter with the same quiet dignity and unwavering spirit that had seen me through so many trials before. Amidst the sadness, amidst the uncertainty, a tiny seed of hope began to sprout. It wasn't a dramatic blossoming, but a quiet, persistent growth, fueled by a stubborn refusal to surrender to despair. It was the realization that even in the face of profound loss, life could continue, could even flourish. I began to see possibilities where I had previously seen only obstacles. The shelter, initially a symbol of my displacement and vulnerability, became a temporary haven, a place to regroup, to gather my strength. The other residents, initially strangers, became a community of sorts, sharing stories, offering support, reminding me that I wasn't alone in my struggles. The simple act of taking care of myself, of ensuring my well-being, became a source of purpose. Each meal consumed, each medication taken, each moment of quiet reflection, these were small victories, small steps towards reclaiming my life. I started to engage in simple activities, reading, writing, watching the world go by from my window. These activities, once taken for granted, now offered a sense of normalcy, of routine, of stability. The possibility of finding a new path, a new sense of purpose, began to take shape. Perhaps I could volunteer. Perhaps I could learn something new. Perhaps I could reconnect with old friends, or even make new ones. The future might be uncertain, but it wasn't devoid of possibilities. It was a blank canvas, waiting to be filled with the colors of my choosing. This new beginning wouldn't erase the pain, the sadness, the sense of loss. It wouldn't magically heal the wounds inflicted by Sarah's actions, but it offered a chance to move forward, to create a life worthy of my resilience, a life filled with dignity, purpose, and a quiet sense of peace. The path ahead remained uncertain, but I was ready to walk it, one step at a time. A new beginning, however fragile, was within reach. Forgiveness. The word hung in the air, heavy with implication, a concept both daunting and liberating. Forgiving Sarah, forgiving myself. These were monumental tasks, intricate processes that required a deep introspection, a willingness to confront the pain, the anger, the hurt. Could I forgive Sarah for her cruelty, for the betrayal, for the callous disregard she showed for our 50-year relationship? A part of me screamed no, fueled by the raw pain of rejection, the sting of abandonment. Another part, however, whispered a different message, a message of understanding, of compassion. Perhaps her actions stemmed from her own pain, her own struggles. Perhaps she was hurting as much as I was, albeit in a different way. Then there was the question of self-forgiveness. Had I done everything I could to maintain our connection? Had I been as present, as understanding, as supportive as I should have been? The regrets gnawed at me. the what-ifs and should-haves echoing in the silence of my thoughts. Perhaps I could have done more, been more understanding, more patient, more forgiving. Perhaps the estrangement wasn't solely her fault. Forgiveness wasn't about condoning her actions or excusing my own shortcomings. It was about releasing the burden of anger and resentment, about freeing myself from the shackles of the past. It was about finding peace, not for her sake, but for my own. It was about accepting the reality of our fractured relationship, acknowledging the pain and moving forward, not necessarily with reconciliation, but with a sense of closure, a sense of inner peace. The path to forgiveness was long and winding, but I was willing to embark on it. The journey, I realized, was as important as the destination. It was a journey of self-discovery, of healing, of finding a quiet solace within myself. Peace wasn't the absence of turmoil, but the ability to find solace amidst it. It wasn't a grand revelation, but a gradual dawning, a quiet acceptance of my new reality. It came in small moments, in quiet reflections, in the simple pleasures of everyday life. The warmth of the sun on my face as I sat by the window of the shelter, watching the world go by. This offered a sense of calm, a connection to the natural rhythm of life. The kindness of a fellow resident, a shared smile, a brief conversation. These small gestures of human connection provided a sense of belonging, a reminder that I wasn't alone. The taste of a simple cup of tea, the feel of a soft blanket on a chilly evening. These sensory experiences grounded me, anchoring me in the present moment. I found peace in the routine, in the predictability of daily life within the shelter. The regular meals, the structured activities, the quiet solitude of my room, these provided a sense of order, of stability, a stark contrast to the chaos that had preceded it. It was a life stripped bare of many things I cherished, but it was a life nonetheless, a life that I was slowly but surely learning to navigate. My writing became a form of therapy, a way to process my emotions, to make sense of the upheaval. Each word written, each sentence constructed was a step towards healing, towards understanding, towards acceptance. I wrote about my childhood memories, about my relationship with Sarah, about the pain of loss, about the struggle to find peace. The act of writing helped me to organize my thoughts, to articulate my feelings, to find a sense of coherence in the midst of chaos. It was a form of self-expression, a way of reclaiming my voice, my narrative, and in that act of creation, I found a quiet sense of peace. The path to peace wasn't a straight line, but a meandering journey, filled with twists and turns, with moments of darkness and moments of light. And in those moments of light, in those quiet pockets of peace, I found the strength to continue, to persevere, to live. The window offered a view of the bustling city, a world continuing its relentless pace, oblivious to my quiet contemplation. Rain lashed against the glass, mirroring the tempest within me, a storm of emotions that had raged for weeks, months, a lifetime even. Yet, there was a stillness now, a quiet acceptance that settled over me like a gentle blanket. The past unfolded before me, a tapestry woven with threads of joy and sorrow, of love and loss, of connection and separation. My childhood, a time of innocence and carefree happiness, now seemed like a distant dream. My life with Mary, the woman I loved more than words could express, a cherished memory, tinged with the bittersweet ache of loss. My relationship with Sarah, a complex, ever-evolving narrative of hope and disappointment, of connection and distance. The present was less clear, less defined. The shelter, a temporary refuge, was not a home. The uncertainty of the future loomed large, a vast and unknown landscape stretching before me. Would I find a new home? Would I ever reconcile with Sarah? Would my health improve? These questions, once filled with anxiety, now felt more like quiet ponderings, gentle inquiries rather than desperate pleas. Yet there was a resilience within me, a quiet strength that had emerged from the depths of my despair. I had faced adversity before, weathered storms that threatened to consume me. This too I would overcome. This wasn't the end, but a transition, a turning point. The rain continued to fall, washing away the grime and the dust, leaving behind a sense of cleansing, of renewal. As I gazed out at the city lights twinkling in the distance, I felt a flicker of hope, a quiet sense of peace. The future remained uncertain, but I was ready to face it, with dignity, with resilience, with the quiet acceptance that comes with time, with age, with a life lived fully, with all its joys and sorrows. This, I realized, was my final reflection, not of despair, but of a life lived, a life learned, a life continuing.